think I'm going to call the meeting to order. She'll be up in a moment, hopefully by the time we finish our Pledge of Allegiance. So I'm going to call to order the county convention, and we'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Is there any public comment? I'd like to start with public comment in case someone would like to speak. Okay, seeing none, I will close public comment. The next item on the agenda is approval of the September 16th meeting minutes. Are there any errors or omissions? Yes, Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. Yes, I'd like to have added the list of questions that I had handed out at the meeting, and as well as the work plan discussed from the Republican caucus members.
With no objection?
Discussion first?
Yes.
Okay. So, could my memory be refreshed as to whether those questions were given as a handout or if they were spoken during the meeting?
I don't recall, but I think I had emailed them out previously, before the meeting. They were, if I might, they were questions related to the budget that we have asked and received answers to in the past, other than last year where I had submitted those questions but did not get answers to about half of the questions that I asked.
Yes.
So, Madam Chair, I'm just addressing the issue of what goes into minutes. And generally speaking, the practice is that if something is discussed in the meeting, it may be noted, although it isn't necessary to note that. And the general practice is if there are handouts at a public meeting, those become part of the public record, but are not necessarily part of, like they're not transcribed into the minutes.
Yes, Representative Alvarez.
Madam Chair, since there was a motion from Representative Cordelli, could we have a second?
Okay, seconded by Representative Nelson.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions or comments? So,
One question.
yes,
For the representative. Do you have copies of those to hand in to, so we can get those added to the minutes if the vote passes?
I believe I had sent them to our administrative assistant.
Thank you.
Extraordinary.
yes. So, okay. I think, is there an objection to having them attached to the minutes and not written in? I think there's,
Are we changing
is
the
there a
motion?
question? Yes.
Are you changing the motion, Madam Chair?
Well, okay. No, I'm just wondering if it would be just as easy, rather than transcribing them all in, to just attach them
Right.
in. So
That
I'm
was my
saying that
intent.
as a discussion, would you
Right,
object
that
to?
was no, that was my intent.
Your
I'm sorry.
intent is
Right.
just to
Right.
attach them?
Yes.
Thank you.
That's what it should be.
Thank you, that's what I'm feeling is a better way to go. Yes? Did you have
May I
another
hear the
comment?
motion read again then?
Addition of the Republican questions and the work plan for the minutes of September 16.
Yes, Representative Nelson?
Could it be noted that there are attached to the regular minutes that have already been done, just a little note attached
Sure.
somehow, that they would know that they were there?
If there's an attachment, certainly. I think that we'll take a vote, and
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
No.
Okay, thank you. So they will be attached, and there will be a note attached to the minutes. Are there any further? Are there any further errors, omissions, or questions on the September 26th meeting? No? Okay. Hearing none. All those in favor of
We don't have a motion to
Oh,
approve those minutes
I'm
yet,
sorry.
Madam Chair.
I need a motion.
So moved.
Representative Cordelli, thank you. A second?
Second.
Okay, Representative Marsh, seconds. All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, the motion carries. Thank you. Okay. The next thing I had on the agenda is an overview of the final 2018 figures, but I think we don't have those in front of us. So I will move on to number 6, which is Melanson and Heath Financial Audit Discussion with Cheryl Burke. Would you like to join us? We have a seat here for you. Thank you. We appreciate your coming. Thank you. So, we have Ms. Burke here to answer any questions we have on the audit, and we are pleased it is finally completed. So, and you would like, do you have something you would like to share with us about the audit, or?
Sure.
Thank you. And then we can ask our questions.
Okay, that
If I
sounds
might.
good.
Madam Chair, if I might, the administrative assistant downstairs is bringing up copies for everyone as soon as they're finished duplicating downstairs.
Thank you.
Sorry.
Nope,
Thank
that's
you.
fine. I can start to talk a little bit. I didn't know if you wanted to go through numbers pages, or if I can give you just a general overview and answer your
I
question.
think if we start with an overview.
Okay, all
That would be
right.
helpful.
Well, just to start, the reason that you hire an audit firm is to give an opinion on your financial statements. And part of providing an opinion on your financial statements is the audit process itself. The audit process, the purpose of the audit process is to obtain audit evidence to support the information that's included in the financial statements, so that we can provide an opinion on it. Other things that we do as part of being your independent auditor are evaluating the accounting policies that you're using, if there's any estimates involved, and the overall presentation of the financial statements, whether they are in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. And those are what governmental entities need to follow for financial statement preparation. Part of an audit also includes an understanding of internal control as it relates to major cycles such as vendor and payroll disbursements, financial reporting itself, treasury function, cash reconciliations, and so forth. So management also has a responsibility with respect to the financial statement audit engagement. It is management's responsibility for the preparation and presentation of the financial statements in accordance with the accounting principles. Management is also responsible for designing, implementing, and operating an effective system of internal controls, providing the auditor to unrestricted access to information, as well as compliance with laws and regulations. Oh, they're here.
Some of them are here.
Some of them are
They're
here.
coming in batches, I guess.
So I'm going to start to talk about the independent auditor's report. Those are the first 2 pages in the financial statements following the table of contents. Again, that is what you're hiring us for, is to provide an opinion, and it's really for users of financial statements, banks, lenders, other users. That should be your first stop. On page 2, yep.
What are you reading from?
The financial statements, that's being circulated.
This is the final audit, financial audit?
Final audited
dated-
financials, yes.
dated-
October 9th.
Okay.
Yep.
So that's what's being passed around, I understand?
Laura Cumming, she's printing downstairs.
Okay.
Yep.
Because I think previously, if I'm not mistaken, we had just received a draft.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I believe there were no changes from the
Okay.
draft to the final report, other than inserting our firm logo and signature on there. So everything, there were no edits to that. So if you had been looking at those previously, you were looking at the final product, just to
Thank you.
clarify that. Yep. So on page 2, that's the second page of the independent auditor's report. For those of you that do have a copy, that's the independent auditor's opinion on your financial statements. This is a clean and unmodified audit opinion. It says that we believe your financial statements are materially fairly stated in accordance with generally accepted accounting principles. Also, I'm just going to point out some of the highlights. It's a very lengthy document, the governmental accounting standards. In recent years, there's been significant changes in some of the pages, and for those of you that got the copy, you have my scribble notes on some of these pages. Looking at page 9, this is the statement of net position with all of the county's activity collapsed into one column. It's using a different method of accounting than you use internally, which is the way that governmental entities do their internal general ledger. The statement of net position is a long-term perspective. It includes all of your long-term assets, such as your capital assets, net of depreciation, and all of the long-term liabilities that are out there. This page is particularly a focus area of lenders, bond rating agencies, and so forth, because it includes everything on there. In recent years, there's been a couple of new governmental accounting standards boards pronouncements, GASBs. Specifically, a few years ago, GASB 68, which required on this page for you to include your proportionate share of the unfunded liability in New Hampshire retirement system. And so that is included as a liability here, as well as what was implemented in these financials in 2018, which was another unfunded liability calculated by your actuary. It is the liability that exists out there for allowing your retirees to participate in your health insurance programs. And this is true for all governmental entities, New Hampshire, throughout the United States, counties, cities, towns, school districts, planning commissions, and so forth. Those two GASBs with those two large liabilities have the impact or the net effect of making your equity in a negative position in this presentation of the financials. Not to be of concern, bond rating agencies are very familiar with the new reporting standards. It really just kind of tells the world that everything that's out there. The next page that I'd like to talk about is on page 11. This is the governmental funds balance sheet showing the general fund and the grants fund. And this is using a method of accounting that is the way your numbers are reported in your general ledger. So these numbers should be very consistent with that. Included in your general fund down the bottom is the fund balance section of the page, including different categories of fund balance. So you have non-spendable, restricted, which typically means external restrictions, and then assigned. Assigned includes any amounts that you've set aside to be used in the next fiscal year to reduce taxes or offset the budget. Encumbrances, and then finally the unassigned fund balance, which is a really key indicator for users of the financial statements. At December 31st, 2018, your unassigned fund balance was $4,718,527, which is about 15% of your total operating expenses in 2018, including county, nursing home, registry of deeds, all of what is considered to be governmental activities. That represents about 2 months of expenses. There is no real hard guideline for what should be in fund balance at the end of the year, but the GFOA, the Government Finance Officers Association, that's a national organization, DRA, they talk about having a couple of months in your fund balance. So you're really right on at that point in time. And that's very consistent with last year. I think last year was about 16%. If you think back in history for Carroll County a few years ago, things were not positive. They were actually in the red. So come a long way there. The other page I wanted to point out, and I'm pointing out kind of the key indicator pages, on page 15, the budget versus actual results. On the far right-hand side is the variance column. that shows the results of comparing the final budget to the final actual amounts on the budgetary basis. And if you look at the far right corner on the bottom of the page, it's a positive $2,250,074. It's primarily a result of underspending appropriations in the general fund of about 1.7 million, and also receiving about $570,000 more than was budgeted. So that's another key indicator there. Any questions on that? Those are really the key highlights. There are probably 20-something pages of footnote disclosure that are required. A lot of it has to do with those new accounting standards, the GASBs that are out there, related to the net pension liability, the New Hampshire retirement system, your proportionate share, as well as what the information that is provided by the actuary for inclusion in your financial statements.
Representative Avalon?
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you for coming in again to talk with us. On page 9, it's statement of net position, top column, top paragraph, if you want to call it, 9,692,012. Doesn't match the balance sheet as of December of 2018 on page 11. It shows 9719441. It has a $27,000 increase due from other funds.
Correct.
Which wasn't on other funds of other.
Yeah, the differences, these two pages are two different presentations, two different methods of accounting. On page 9 is all funds together, not just the general fund and the grants fund, and on page 11 you have the columns separately. The differences, the due from up there, the 27,000, there's a corresponding due to in the liability section on page 11 in the grants fund. That's because the grants funds don't have their own bank accounts. You have a pooled cash. All the cash resides in your general fund. And when you pay bills to other funds, there's a lending and borrowing arrangement that automatically happens through your accounting system. On page 9, you collapse those two funds together, and those two items net together. So that's why that is not there.
Representative
you.
Bucco?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mrs. Burke, thank you for coming up and being available for us to ask questions again. On my draft, page 3, which is under the management discussion, it says, all changes in net position are reported as soon as the underlying event giving rise to the change occurs, regardless of timing and of the related cash flows. Does that mean that we're using accrual accounting for all county operations now?
You're right on here. That's talking basically between the differences between the different methods of accounting. There's 3 different possibilities: cash basis, modified accrual basis, and full accrual basis. Government-wide financial statements are using full accrual, which basically means when you incur an expense, I'll use that as an example, you record that, not necessarily when you pay it. Going back to your question right there, the method of accounting that you use in your general ledger, or you should be using in your general ledger to provide the delegation, the commissioners with their internal reports, should be on the modified accrual basis of accounting, which is similar to the full accrual basis. So it really, I mean, some folks keep their general ledgers on a cash basis during the year, and then at the end of the year, when you have to do those financial statements in accordance with that basis of accounting, they convert it. They book all the receivables, the payables, accruals, and so forth. But for the most part, you should be, in order to get a true picture on an interim basis, you should be using something pretty close to the accrual basis of accounting. So that's not just when you pay liabilities, it's when they happen.
Thank you. It may follow up. In the past, in past visits when you were here, you let us know that we were using both a cash system and an accrual system, basically for the nursing home, and there was no way to reconcile them. And so have we changed that to what is generally accepted at this point?
On an interim basis, I really can't speak to that. For our focus is mainly on the end of the year, so when you come to provide us with the information to audit, it should be on the modified accrual or accrual basis of accounting. It should be converted at that point in time, regardless of what you have done during the year.
Thank you.
Representative Knurr?
Oh, I just have a very simple question, and I'm sorry to have to ask this. Could you explain the acronym OPEB, just what does it stand for?
Sure, other post-employment benefits.
Got it, thank you.
Representative Marsh?
Yes, thank you very much. As you may or may not be aware, we currently have a state law that requires our audit to be completed 120 days after the close of books, which is considerably sooner than now. Given that what you've just made us aware of, that we are actually working on an accrual-based system, is there any reason that we need to delay getting this audit done in the future until all of things are paid, since we are not paying attention to that in the audit, we're paying attention to when the expenses were actually accrued? So the intent of my question is, can we expect our audit sooner next year?
In reality, in order to get very accurate numbers on the accrual basis of accounting, you can get most of that information into your books probably within that time frame. But sometimes there's other things that trickle in, like vendors that don't bill, within 2 weeks of their year end. I know Lance and Heath is probably a month out on their bills. So if you're not aware of those bills that are out there, you still have expenses and liabilities that belong to the fiscal year that don't get in there. So in order to get a really accurate number, it's best to leave to let things trickle in and record them as they come in. I'm not sure if that makes sense. You want to be very sure that you have everything included before you take your numbers to go to audit. There's certain tests that we perform a couple of months out in order to make sure that you've captured all of that information. So, certain types of cutoff testing. So for example, we would look for you probably at least a couple of months out through the end of February, all of your transactions, to make sure that none of them need to come back into the calendar year.
Representative Cordelli?
Thank you also for being here. You just mentioned your firm would bill it basically a month after probably.
Mm-hmm.
But wouldn't we have encumbered that money in that, let's say, 2018? With the anticipation that we will be paying it in 2019 from 2018 funds?
That is yet another method of accounting. That's not, the accrual basis or modified accrual basis would not capture that expense until it was actually incurred, which means that until we bill you based on the amount of time that we've incurred. So if that time had been incurred, the expense wouldn't be reflected in here. Another example is, you encumbered, some other type of consultant services for the calendar year, and technically what should be in there is what has happened, either goods received or services provided as of the end of the year, not necessarily what has been encumbered.
Representative Avaloni?
Thank you. Oh, did Glenn have a follow-up?
Do you have a follow-up?
No, separate questions. Go ahead.
Thank you. Thank you again for being here. When a cost is incurred on a modified, shouldn't it be logged when it's incurred? So if somebody spends something on December 1st, it might not be billed till January 30th. On a December 1st, it should have been logged by whoever expended that. So it could be reflected in either encumbrances or as an expense already.
That is true. But in reality, it probably wouldn't happen because the source documents that are used to get the information into the accounting system are typically bills and invoices. And unless somebody spent the money and brought the accounting department that receipt for them to record, they wouldn't have that information, so it's really the timing of it. So for instance, if you charge something on your credit card on December 1st and you don't get the bill until January 3rd or something like that, the accounting department doesn't have the information to record to the general ledger until that time. You know, in their mind, they should know, there's credit card, there's a statement that's due, and they should be able to go online or whatever to get that information and book it. But those are the types of things that they need to think about when they're closing the books, is that they have captured everything that is out there, regardless of, you know, receiving a bill or an invoice or a statement for payment.
Thank you.
Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. In your September letter, I think, to the delegation, you indicated that the audit couldn't be completed yet because there was information still needed to complete the required procedures. Could you tell us what information has been the delay?
I don't remember specifically at that point in time, but we had been making some good progress, and then our key contact for the audit became unavailable due to health issues for quite some time. So that really made things come to a complete stop for a time.
Yes, Representative Cordelli, follow.
Yeah, I think would be important, since this is basically at least the third year where, you know, we haven't had an audit completed until October or later. When there is information not provided to you, I think it would be helpful for us to know what that information is so we can try and modify our processes so that information is available on a more timely basis. So I don't know if there's any help you can provide us in that regard.
Sure, yep. I mean, some of the examples of information that would be needed that I know were provided, I'll use the 120 days as an example, but all the cash reconciliations, payables, essentially everything that's on the balance sheet. If you look on page 11, I mean, those are, there's much more information needed, but everything to support the numbers on the balance sheet is required. So cash reconciliations, subsequent months cash statements so that they could be tested for cutoff, receivables aging reports, an estimate of the potentially uncollectible receivable amounts, inventory balances, prepaid expenses, that's pretty doable very early on. All of the accounts payable and accrued expenses, so that seems to be the one that lags quite a bit. So those are the types of things that would be needed to support the information in the financial statements.
Representative Nelson?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sure it doesn't happen here in the county, but is it possible for counties to just sit on a bill because they want to get to the end of the year and make it look good? I know there's a $20,000 bill out there, I'll wait and pay it in March or something.
Yes, it's always possible that can happen. We auditors try to do a cutoff test, as I explained. So what they do is they look into the next fiscal year, a couple of months out, and see what has happened. If you're sitting on it for more than a couple of months, sometimes it doesn't get captured. You know, if we think that the organization is particularly risky in that area, we'll take it out more than 2 months to do that, perform that testing. So it's possible. Mm-hmm.
Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. You mentioned year-end closing and so forth, and that was brought up in your 2016 audit management letter. And it was based on improvements needed to be made to that process. And then the current status you indicated was that it had been resolved. We have had a series of questions and discussions about year-end closing and when that occurs and if that occurs. Most recently, as I can recall, I believe it was Commissioner McCarthy asked our administrator have the books closed, and this was a month or so ago. And the answer from the administrator was that the books don't close for expenses, just for revenue. Can you enlighten us on your thoughts on that statement and closing of books?
I'm not sure I understand that response. Closed is kind of just a terminology of the trade of the accounting world. In my mind, they're closed when there are no more adjustments that are needed to the financial statements for these numbers. That's closed.
So if the books weren't closed on a timely fashion, I'm sorry,
That's
can I follow
okay.
up?
Yeah.
That would delay your processes.
That's correct, right.
Representative Bucco?
Oh, thank you, Madam Chair. So there's a statement here that net position is maybe useful and an indicator of county's financial position over time. And so, can you explain on this draft? This is on page 5 on the draft that I have, and maybe 6 in yours, where it shows net position, and the net position for 2018 is a negative $763,000 versus 2017, which is a negative $294,000. Can you explain? I guess I'm confused by the parentheses.
It's negative. It's confusing. What you're looking at is called the management's discussion and analysis
Yes.
section, and it's that particular part of it is talking about page 9 and 10 in the financial statements, which is the full accrual basis of accounting. That's the methodology that's showing all of the long-term assets and liabilities, including the unfunded liability for the net pension liability in the retirement system, as well as the net OPEB liability. So that's why that number is negative, because if you look on page 9, the liabilities that exist as of the end of the year, see net pension liability, it's $14 million a liability. That's your piece of, that's causing, part of the reason that's causing that negative $763,000. Right beneath it, the OPEB liability, $2,055,000. That's another reason for that negative right there. So this is what these two accounting pronouncements are making this page in financial statements look like for governmental entities. There are hardly any governmental entities that are participating in this type of retirement system or offering this to retirees have a net positive net position at the end of the year because of these liabilities. So it does look rather ugly. This page, first numbers page that you see in governmental financial statements, but it is, I don't even think I have a governmental client that has a positive net position because of these two line items.
Thank you. May I follow up? Is
Yes.
that because they were not carrying that? They were not posting that liability in the past?
Those two liabilities and this
Oh, the old-
presentation, those two liabilities do not need to get posted to your general ledger because this is a different method of accounting right there. These are two unfunded liabilities that don't need to be budgeted for. It's just the accounting reporting standards that say, we want to know everything that's out there. So it
Thank
doesn't
you.
need to get onto your books.
Thank you.
Representative Marsh?
Yes, I'm trying to reconcile the statement you made about the audit grinding to a halt due to the absence of a single contact at the business office with your statement about internal controls at the bottom of page 1 and page 2. And what you say is the procedures selected depend on the auditor's judgment and et cetera to determine whether the internal controls are adequate. Do you feel that you received enough information from independent sources to feel that there's no material misstatement in these reports?
Yes, that's what the opinion paragraph states, is that we believe they're materially fairly stated.
Thank you, that's what we needed to know.
Okay, Representative Cordell?
Thank you. You mentioned something that could delay the process would be reconciliations. This has been a subject for many years here, dating back to the 2014 audit, reports from DRA, and in 2018, performance audit, as well as some of your previous 2016, I think, management letter, and that bank reconciliations were not being done on a timely basis. Are you expecting another management letter to be submitted to us in terms of looking at internal controls such as reconciliations?
I do recall that the history of the bank reconciliations not being timely. I think my recollection for 2018 was not so much the bank reconciliations, it's more of the putting the books on the accrual basis, looping in those straggling items. Those seems to be what are causing the delays at the end of the year. As far as the management letter goes, last year's recommendations related to improving controls over the payroll disbursements process, specifically supporting documentation and approvals. And I know that in 2018, you implemented an outsourced service that has definitely improved the situation there. So I think as far as that recommendation, we definitely report that there were improvements made, and we would not have any new recommendations for a management letter.
Okay, so there will be no further.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I'd like to ask a question. Given your experience working here in Carroll County and in other businesses, would you, with other agencies, groups, and entities with this amount of complexity, this size of a budget, would you feel that our staffing is adequate to meet this needs? We seem to have chronic problems with timeliness of receiving reports, of things being up to date. Do you feel that we are not given our financial management department sufficient resources to maintain and keep up to date? We are updating and changing our system, our software, and we're going into the cloud and all this because we kept being told, well, we can't till we get to the cloud, we can't till we get to the cloud. Do you feel that we are adequately supporting the system with adequate staffing, with the capabilities and the numbers of staff to do it? Do you feel that's part of the issue?
In my opinion, I do think the staffing is the issue here. The staffing that you currently have has the technical expertise to prepare accurate financial statements. When the information is provided, it is accurate. It's just that, as evidenced by what happened, I mean, you're putting a lot of responsibility on one person, and when that person's not available, things come to a halt. And so there should be a backup plan for your organization, for any organization. There always should be cross-training and someone else available to take on those responsibilities in case someone's not available to do that. So I do think staffing is the issue, and that person's doesn't have the time. There's extra time that's needed to close a fiscal year out, over and above the regular monthly responsibilities, and there's a lot more to it.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Yes, Representative Armani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again. Under governmental activities, page 10, it says charges for services. Were those cash-based estimates or final numbers, or was that done by accrual?
That's accrual basis.
All of them? Thank you.
Are there any further questions? Oh, yes.
Madam Chairman,
Commissioner
if I
Devine.
may follow up on concern of staffing, what would be your recommendations?
To increase the staffing in your finance office, I probably a head accounting person, a junior accounting person who's assuming a lot of the responsibility, so that person can kind of be more the high-level person to make sure that the person that's responsible for the payroll is doing that properly. So that's kind of part of the internal control piece. But then at the year end, making sure the accrued payroll is calculated in a timely manner into the general ledger. You know, those are examples. Same thing on the payable side. And then if that person were to not be there, junior accountant could step up and do all the reconciliations, make all of the adjustments, that kind of thing. Would probably be the best case scenario.
Thank you very much.
Mr. Costello?
Yes, again, I appreciate you coming and helping some of these issues and questions. When you mention junior accounting and so forth, you are talking about an actual accountant type person, not just a bookkeeper.
Correct. Bookkeeper tends to, most with that level of expertise are doing things cash basis, just recording cash in, cash out, receipts and disbursements. But an accountant will have the background in the accrual basis accounting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Representative Lyon?
Thank you. Going back to my question of the charges for services, did you have to adjust that from a cash basis to an accrual?
My recollection is no, that everything was provided to us ultimately on the accrual basis. So that would be primarily it's the nursing home or revenues is probably the biggest piece of it on the accrual basis. But yes, that is adjusted.
Thank you.
Yep.
Any further questions? Okay, I have actually one that came from Representative Cordelli. Actually, he brought it up, and I would like to see what your thought is about if that has not been answered in further questions we've asked of administration, is about what would be involved in a move from a July to June fiscal year.
Oh, there's other counties that we have worked with that are in the process of doing that. We out of Rockingham County, I would highly recommend that you reach out to their finance director, Chuck Nickerson. He is, we're currently auditing. They've switched from the December year end to the June. I'd say he's probably the best person to talk to about all of the considerations that you should look at before switching your year end there. But certainly, there's a lot to that too.
Just the process.
Yeah, but I know
Until it gets
other
straightened out.
counties are looking at it too.
Okay, Representative
Thank you, Madam
Kaiser.
Chair, thank you so much. So is the concern or the extra complexity just with making the transition? Or is there some disadvantage to having a July fiscal year?
July or June, most of them are June.
June 30.
June 30 year end.
July 1st.
No disadvantage on that, it's just, it's a big undertaking. It's like a software conversion, depending, I know, I'll use Rockingham as an example. Their audit's an 18-month audit, so, there wasn't a short year audit when they switched over. So they haven't had an audit for a year and a half, and it will be for 18 months. It's just a lot internally, payroll systems, accounting systems, you have to, I'm sure he has a checklist of considerations.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think that by statute, you have to post a year and a half budget.
Yeah, I think that's what they ended up doing.
So, I mean, that's,
Yeah, you have to be really forward-thinking on that and plan it, and yeah, I know they had to go through a lot.
Are there any further questions? You'll probably have a lot after you leave.
That's okay. Feel free to send them if you have follow-up questions.
Thank you very much. We appreciate your coming, and it's been very helpful. So thank you.
Thank you.
The next item on the agenda is the 2020 budget progress on the commissioners.
Thank you very much. The department heads have met with the finance office and put together their budgets. They've all been submitted to Kathy last Friday. Tomorrow and Thursday, the commissioners are having meetings with the department heads of the various departments. We've also scheduled 2 days next week for hoping to do 3 departments a day. I don't know. We want to be out by 12, so we're hopeful that we will get the budget to you early this year, hopefully even 2 weeks early, so that you can look at it, observe it, and then within the time frame start working on it. We also kind of hope that the delegation subcommittees would do some work before the end of the 30-day wait period before you make decisions on it, so that you might get a budget done earlier this year.
Thank you. Are there any questions? Yes, Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. I was wondering if the commissioners met with the department heads, gave them any of their thoughts or instructions prior to the departments starting to work on their budgets.
Not officially, but they have been unofficially spoken to that we would like to keep a 0 increase in the bottom line. Also, that's my personal opinion. The other commissioners have spoken to them and talked about the needs-based budget, which I think the needs-based budget and the actual 0 increase at the bottom line may not be compatible, as we do have contracts that are in negotiation at the time.
Yes, Representative Cordelli.
Yes. Listening, watching some of your meetings, something that has been very, very, very troubling to me, as has been done in the past, is your, it seems like, intent to move forward at this point, setting non-union raises while you are starting negotiations with unions that would undoubtedly include salary increases for them. I do not see how it's possible to realistically negotiate a contract when you've already set raises for non-union staff. It does not seem possible to have a valid process where that happens, and it'll certainly cloud my judgment in terms of looking at the budget if you proceed in that direction.
Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, seeing no one, thank you for your report. I just wanted to bring up that a suggestion came up in one of our meetings, actually from Representative Marsh, that we, as we go through the information gathering, the development of the budget, if the budget can be posted on the county website prior to the public hearing, to make sure that the public is aware of the information and where we are going, to be totally open. That was a suggestion that I thought was a very good one. So,
Thank you.
yes, Representative Cordelli.
If that in fact does happen and that's posted online, would there be a vehicle for which the public who may be not able to attend a public hearing or other meeting be able to electronically submit questions or concerns about the budget?
That's a good suggestion. Perhaps we could put, online in that a contact that they can send to if they have questions.
That'd be good.
I think that's a good idea.
Great idea.
Yeah. And then we can give it to the appropriate committee to deal with. Very good. Are there any other questions on that? Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The question is delayed, and I think it's delayed, listening to the commissioners speak and Representative Cordelli. So I understand it, Commissioner Brevard, there's been no, I just want to make sure I'm clear I'm hearing this. There's been no official communication from the commissioners to the department chairs as regards preparation of their budget. You were talking about a zero-based budget, and I heard you talk about a needs-based budget. So if there's no direct communication from the commissioners as an entity to the department chairs, how do they know what to bring back?
We have a lot of faith in our department heads, and we believe that they will come in with their budget, they'll present it to us. We can then discuss it with them, ask them why things may have gone up or down, etc. And then the commissioners discuss with them what needs to be added or taken away or whatever. And then the commissioners get together and do a final overview of the budget. And this year, we have every intention of keeping all of the department heads quite informed and quite in the loop of creating the final budget that we give to delegation.
Thank you. Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. I guess I'm not entirely sure what you mean by a needs-based budget, but I'm wondering also if, in line with that, if the commissioners have discussed already what they foresee as priorities in their mind for the budget. Budget should be about priorities. So I'm just wondering, going into the process, do the commissioners have any priorities in mind for 2020?
I can only speak for myself. I am keeping an open mind. Mr. Bassett might want to address the needs-based part of the budget.
You're the chairman, Madam. You answer. We have not discussed any needs. We just got into a discussion this past week between the three of us what may be our goal for the non-union workers, but that's as far as we go.
Just to follow up, yes, perhaps when, as the process moves forward, you can let us know what the commissioner's priorities are for the budget. So that might be helpful in our deliberations, knowing what your priorities are.
Okay, thank you. Representative Ticehurst?
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I think sometimes using the term budget adds confusion to the process. So it may be more useful to think of it as the department heads bring to the commissioners their knowledge of the situation within their departments, of what it takes to run their department, what changes there are, what the situation is in their departments. So what is falling apart, what is going to cost more than last time, what are the new regulations that they're going to have to meet, that kind of thing. So they're not actually really bringing a budget, they're bringing the information to the commissioners so the commissioners can make a good decision. And then the commissioners, I do believe there is one place in the law that mentions the commissioner's budget, but mostly it mentions recommendations. So the commissioners will have their own personal and collective priorities, but they'll bring to the delegation the recommendations, and the delegation can choose to follow them or not, and may have other priorities and other factors that they take into account. For example, the delegation may take into account what the economic conditions of the county are, and it's the delegation that makes the actual budget. So each is contributing a different type of information to the entire budget. So I think that might be helpful.
Thank you. Representative Cordelli?
I'm just not quite clear what the representative meant by, what the departments should be bringing forward. Would it be just a number of staff that they want, or if they want an additional LPN, they would put that in a letter to the commissioners? I'm not sure. Wouldn't they be presenting numbers that they want to use for their operations for the following year, AKA a budget?
May I respond? Sure. Of course they would be bringing numbers, but numbers don't tell the whole story. They also traditionally, and I would hope would continue to bring the information about programs, about goals, about processes that back the numbers. Because a budget does include numbers, and that's all you see in the budget, but it's backed by science, it's backed by evidence, it's backed by trends, it's backed by laws, it's backed by regulations.
Did you have your hand up?
Go ahead.
Yes, Representative Cordelli.
So basically, the department also should bring forward their priorities, and then the commissioners will bring forward their priorities. Is that an accurate summation of what you're saying?
I was not saying that, but I don't see why they would not bring their priorities. I think we're all influenced by our priorities.
Is there any other discussion on this? Okay, then I will move on.
No, just
Yes,
an
Representative.
overview of, we're on line 8, right, oversight and information gathering.
Yes.
Should those requests go directly to the chair, and then the chair would disseminate that information to the appropriate commissioner or county administrator?
I think we talk in our budget process, I'm not sure I'm understanding the question. In our budget process, I think we already, the commissioners meet with the department heads, and then when we have our committee meetings, we also have the department heads come to our meetings, and the commissioners can have input. Our process does have the input. I mean, is that what we're, have their contribution and priorities? We try to listen to those. Yes.
No, thank you, Madam Chair. Just so everybody's clear of where, if they're not on a committee and they have a question about something, would they direct a question to the subcommittee chair? Would they direct a question to you? Would they ask it in open? Just move the budget process along so we don't have 100 questions on the day that we go over that budget.
That makes sense. I mean, it's my guess, I would say we would give it to the committee chair if they have a question.
Okay.
For that particular section of the budget. If other people have other ideas, I'd be happy to listen to those. But I think we do have to have our process. We do have to make sure we stay in the proper channels, that if we're going to efficiently get the budget done. So I would assume that if it's a question about a particular budget, for instance, the jail budget, that you would go to the jail subcommittee chair with your questions and make sure it's dealt with there. Does that make sense?
Yes,
To people?
it does. Yes.
Okay, thank you. And on that note, we'll move on to number 9, and the jail subcommittee update. Representative Knirk, would you like to share
Yes.
what's happened in that committee?
Yes, we met a couple of times over the summer. The goal had been to look at the question of how we might be able to cut costs in the House of Corrections without interfering with the programs. So we gathered information regarding average daily population and bookings and the impact of drug court and bail reform and a lot of other factors. As far as the average daily population, remember our capacity is 73 is the proposed capacity for the jail that we can't go over. And that, for example, in 2015, we were at 48 for the average daily population. In 16, we were at 61, 17, 57. In 2018, 49. So it's kind of gone up and down, but it's not a massive change. But the range, for example, in 18, the range through the year went from 39 at a low to 83 above capacity for a high. So again, it's not something where every day there's only 49 people, and it has a lot of variability. When we looked at the question of the impact of drug court and bail reform, in Carroll County with the drug court, only 7 participants have entered the program, at least as of the summer when we discussed this. In bail reform, it resulted in more offenders being booked in and out more quickly. So the average length of stay dropped from a few years ago at 45 days to now about 30 days at this point in time. In other words, people tend to be there shorter because we're not holding as many people there with the bail reform. But as you well know, there's still been a lot of question about what we're going to do about bail reform, whether any of this may get rolled back, changed, continue with the bail reform, but make it a better system or implement it better. We also did the difficulty comparing budgets. When we try to compare budgets of different counties, we find that our budget includes the heat, electricity, and maintenance. Some other ones do not, so they may not be strictly comparable. In other words, heat, electricity, and maintenance may be a central budgetary component for them, and not in each of the departments like the House of Correction or their nursing home and so on. But in ours, it is included. We did go into a non-public session to discuss staffing. Obviously, I'm not going to discuss that in detail here. But I think, report that just given the risk and gender stratification that we do in our pods, that it appears that we can't really drop our staffing below the current level to be able to provide adequate staffing in the model that we have. So overall, it appeared that we can't really necessarily change design right now to make a difference, but we still think we want to be looking at where things may be going in the field of corrections, again, with drug court, bail reform, all of these other things. And the commissioners apparently have been considering a request for proposals to study what the county might be able to do as we move forward for the next 10 to 20 years. That's been estimated may run around $60,000. And as a group, our subcommittee recommended that we would suggest including that in the 2020 budget to start that process. So I know it's a little early in the budgetary process, but we would suggest that that would be considered in the commissioner's budget, which I think you already were, but we were sort of supporting that concept from the commissioners.
I think I had one question that
Please
you
feel
have
free.
not discussed, is the difference between how many of those are Carroll County residents
Yes.
versus the people that we bring in, and we had asked for those numbers, and I don't know if we have been receiving them.
Well, we had, oh goodness, actually Representative Teicher's put it in graphical form when we were given some information, so that, for example, in the average daily population, oh goodness, this is not the right one, it is a significant number of people are from other counties, but it varies a great deal from month to month and year to year, because we're taking basically the overflow, for example, from Stratford. And so, for example, just pulling up a random day here where we had 59 inmates, 30 were Carroll County. But it can vary a great deal. Another time, 38 inmates, 21 from Carroll County. So we do have a significant number of boarders. There has been concern that we do not recoup our costs, but some of these border policies, or I should say rates, are set on a statewide basis, so we can't really negotiate that particularly. The other one is going to be going to the lowest bidder, and it's felt that we probably can't go up on that and be able to actually still get them. We also have a new thing, we're beginning the female inmates from the state that is going to be starting, or maybe has started. Has. And that is going to be providing a bit more revenue. So that does have some revenue. But the question, it appeared that even if we dropped all of that, saying, hey, we don't make money on these people, which we don't, but that we still couldn't change our staffing. It's not like we can close down, it appears, half of the county, half of the jail, and to house fewer inmates because of the way that we do our pod system, the risk and gender stratification. And obviously members of the committee who were there, if they want to speak up and alter a little bit what I said or expound upon it, please feel free. This is just my summary.
I've had several hands come up here. You had a question, I think, first. Representative Avalani?
I think we should approve those minutes as well, Madam Chair.
Okay, we'll hold that until we're done here. You had a question?
A clarification. So my understanding, and please, if the superintendent would correct me if I'm wrong, is that when we take in boarders, our overhead doesn't increase. We're paying the same for heat, electricity, et cetera, with or without them. The only expenses that we have that increase for a boarder are a very small amount for clothing if we need to buy new clothing, meals, which are very, very low, and let's see, it seems like there's one more thing I can't recall right now, but we don't pay their medical We don't give them programming unless we have a space available, if I'm correct. So actually, every boarder that we take in gives us a better financial position in the county. And if the superintendent would just correct me if I'm wrong on that.
No, you're not wrong. And it's the same across the other counties too. As many boarders they can take in does help. Some take in feds, like in Chichester and Stratford. Some take in, like Grafton, take the females from Comeau County. Every little bit helps reduce the cost we got to bring in taxes.
So Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. I'm not sure if the committee looked into it, but the revenue you get from other counties in the state, what account or counts do those revenues flow? Would it be possible to find that out?
The borders revenue?
Yeah, the border revenue, to what account does that go?
Is there an account number?
Yes.
And all the money goes into one account?
Yes.
Representative Avalani?
Okay.
That's listed in your revenue for the jail, correct? I think it is?
Yeah, it's broken down. I have the number off the top of my head, but it's broken down. It says borders specifically in the jail revenue.
Right.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If we have, say, 17 Carroll County employees and inmates, what is the staffing level for that?
We go to staffing level, that's why we're not public.
Yeah, this is a problem.
3, 5, 10? We don't need to talk about specific positions and or anything else.
You
What is
want to talk about specifics? 'Cause
no
that's-
specifics, just generalizations.
I can say 100 will make a difference. So,
Yeah,
I withdraw the question, Madam Chair.
that's the kind of, may I just comment, that's what we did discuss in the non-public session, was an actual, the mechanics of how it all works, to understand that.
It's,
It's very
I
low.
understand it's tied to the layout of the jail. If we can't make an adjustment to that, then we're stuck with, even if our numbers go low, we still have to maintain a large high cost.
What I can say is, we have a lot of positions that are doing double duty. We don't have a large amount of staffing. We have staff that's doing double duty as best they can.
Okay. Yes.
I guess this is a question for Jason. Jason, if I talk to one of my colleagues, another representative from Stratford County, and would they tell me that they're paying everyone, other counties, $30 a day for their prisoners to go to other counties?
The prisons don't go to other counties, we're just having to take overflow from them. We're the only one that they're actually using the overflow for.
Okay.
So right now they don't. I've asked them to look and see if they've raised it, so they're looking into it. Again, that's on their end, I've asked. But they don't send anybody out, we just happened, that they needed some overflow somewhere, and we had space, so we said we can do it.
So no other folks from Stratford County going to other counties?
Not that I know of, and I can find out for you if I can.
I can find out.
That's fine,
Okay.
but not that I know of.
So why aren't we negotiating, if we're taking all their overflow and nobody else's, why can't we say now we're gonna charge $40 a person?
I've asked what they want, if they're up, but again,
Why are you asking? Why can't you tell them that it's?
two things. If you want to keep the revenue so we can have some borders, pushing it, let us take them back and put them on stack of books. So I'm trying to work with them to see if they're willing to raise it. If the commissioners want to go and say, this is what it's going to be in period, that's fine. They can most certainly do that. And then the Stratford County would have to make a decision of what they want to do.
Yes, Representative Cordelli.
Thank you. I sat in on, I think, the first subcommittee meeting for a while, and the discussion was the determination of the average daily population, and I left that meeting shaking my head as to how that was calculated. So I went and took a look at U.S. Department of Justice, Office of Justice Programs, Bureau of Justice Statistics. And their definition of the average daily population is the average is derived by the sum of inmates in jail each day for a year divided by the number of days in the year. And I'm wondering if, Representative Kinner mentioned some numbers, and I'm wondering if, is that the means that you're, is this the calculation that you're using in those numbers?
I think that was correct, right? Yes. Yes, Jason is nodding his head, that is how these are derived. That's why we have an ADP for a year, but there's a range but you can't really do an ADP per day because it's an average per year.
Right, well, that's, the numbers you cited, 79 or as opposed to, 59, on a daily basis. Is this how you derive the daily population or not?
Well, the daily population was derived, as best I understand, the way you described it, which is the sum total of days is the number of inmate days divided by 365. But what I was giving is I added in for 18, that the actual number who were in overnight varied a great deal, that the average daily population captures an average. Just like the average temperature on Washington is something like 30-some degrees, but it can vary between 70 and minus 40. So it's an average for the year, and that's how it's derived.
Representative Marsh?
Comeau.
Oh, Comeau. Representative Comeau, I'm sorry.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Would it be appropriate then to add two different non-publics to our item number 12, one being G, jail, that way we can vet that out very quickly?
Yes, we can talk about it then.
That's for G, that would be the exemption, and I would like to add E for legal, that way we can do that since it costs a lot of money to get us all here in one spot. So that's G and E.
G and E.
A3, 2, Roman 2, A and E.
Oh, A and E,
E and G.
It's RSA 91 dash.
Oh, he's in the non, okay. Okay.
Just looking.
You're in the RSA?
Yeah.
Okay, I was looking and said, where was he getting these?
Okay.
I thought we already knew.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions for the jail subcommittee? Okay, is there any other business to be brought before the meeting?
Yes.
Yes, I do have several things that I wanted to bring up, a couple that I had missed in the agenda, and also Representative Knurk would like to speak for just a couple of minutes about the broadband.
Yes, just very quickly, as many of you saw in the newspaper about a week and a half ago, I think it was, that we did, the Carroll County Broadband, which is the group that is a coalition of the towns working together toward this, led by Rick Highland and Steve Knox, did receive a $250,000 USD Rural Development Grant to proceed along with a feasibility study and develop business plans for what we might be able to do about rolling out broadband through the county. This is matched with about $250,000 from our partners in the grant application. And with all that in mind, all the towns who joined in to this process already except Jackson and Bartlett. As we move forward on this gathering of data and the feasibility question, what's going to be gathered are basically the issue of where is there service and where is there not service. Actually, the primary thing is where is there not service, because according to the RSA, we have to have a request for information submitted to the providers to gather that data before we can consider a bond. Now, a bond may not be what we go with. For example, Sandwich is currently working on a parallel process as a separate town, considering bonding, but also considering trying to press private providers to do the rollout themselves. And that we have not, again, come up with any conclusion about how we will try to finance this county-wide. But it is important, and I've spoken to Representative Burrows already, that we try to get Jackson and Bartlett into this, or they're just simply going to be left out. They're going to have to then figure it out on their own, and that's kind of unfortunate. It's important, again, to realize the towns that are participating are not obligated to do any of this. They are just simply coming together, joining forces, gathering data, so we can try to roll out the largest, most robust program that we can to try to cover the whole county. There have been some interesting things that we found with some statutes that were difficulty. One of them was in gathering the data. It is allowed, again, it's not allowed, it's mandated that you have to have a request for information to providers before you can proceed with bonding. However, there's no penalty if the provider simply doesn't give it. And a lot of the providers simply don't want to give this information. They don't want to let people know just how poor their coverage is in many areas. So as it came up at our last broadband meeting, it was after the closure of submission of LSRs on the House side. So I had to scramble to work with getting Jeff Bradley, who kind of basically kicked this down to one of his people in the minority office. And together with them, we crafted an LSR that has to do with putting in a penalty, being simply if they don't respond, the assumption is whatever they served that they didn't respond on will be called non-served. So that'll be kind of a rather harsh option, that maybe then they'll actually do it. The other one had to do with getting E911 access. In Vermont, there is ability to access that, not for names or anything else, because there is a right to know section in the RSA about the E911. But the issue is just to find out, is it a business, is it a house, or is it an empty lot? Because we need to know that we don't need to worry about, we can't ask for bonding for funding broadband to an empty lot. And it's different for a business than for a premise, but with no personal information. So that is another LSR. Actually, I think they did lump them together. And one LSR which will also allow, or change slightly that right to know, to allow the municipalities to gain access to knowing what kind of building or what kind of business or house is on a given E911 address. So that's where we're really going, and so we're making some progress. Again, this is a very long process. After we get this together, we are meeting next with a couple of different providers, and the hope is one of them will actually say, we'd be glad to do this, because they'll hopefully eventually make money with it. If not, then maybe resorting to some bonding, which some towns may wish to do, some towns may wish not to do. So that's an update from us.
Representative Bucco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. As I recall, the article that reported that you had received, that these towns had received the bond, it also said that there were no taxes and no bonding authority. So, but I've heard you say bonding a couple of times.
Well, no, the grant is, oh, may I respond? Yes, the grant is only to do the feasibility studies. This has nothing to do with actually any bonding or anything, but to gather the feasibility study of saying, what is it, where are the addresses which are not served, so that we can then put together a business proposal. The reason I brought up bonding is those are the changes in some statutes that had to be done, because we're working proactively. We may, a year or so from now, wish to proceed with bonding, but to proceed with bonding, one has to get this information. And so the way you actually make the request for information to a service provider is you say, well, we want this because we may proceed to bonding, and the statute allows you to do that. So there's no bonding going on yet, because again, our goal would be that we don't do that. We would love to just get the ISPs, an ISP who's actually interested in it. And as we've put out some publicity on this, we've had people that have responded from all around the country interested in coming up and working on this. There's a nonprofit ISP called ValleyNet, or EC Fiber, which is handling a part of the western part of our state in Vermont, that's already strung themselves 1,400 miles of fiber. And they made that a nonprofit ISO, and I don't think that one involved bonding. Chesterfield is looking into bonding. So there's a lot of different parallel strategies being looked at. But this has nothing to do with bonding at this point. This is just for a feasibility study.
Thank you.
Yes.
Representative Avalani.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Who's doing the feasibility study?
Oh, we haven't got that organized yet. I mean, we're going to be putting out, well, first of all, actually back up. We first started gathering some data by the municipalities will put in requests to the internet service providers to find out what is not served. So that's the first part. That's not the study. The various partners, CTC Technologies, Rural Innovation Strategies, and ValleyNet, each have their own strengths that we may be able to leverage, that they're actually putting up some of the money, and they will be able to provide us with, they're working with 6 different locations around the country on this, by the way, so that they will be able to bring in, if they do a survey, for example, it doesn't have to be just for Carroll County, it could be used in each of these different sites. But then we will have to choose somebody to actually do that proposal. This is the seed money first to just get started on the process.
Are there any further questions? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Also on to other business, there were a couple of things that were left from the last meeting. One is, do we have an update on the IDN information? Does anyone? That we do not. Do you have an update on IDN, on how that is coming?
Jason?
Ken sits on that, only backup, so no, I don't.
So he does not have that information.
So I know that all 10 counties are meeting on IDN and discussing what portions the counties are looking at to send back to the IDN and match the money. There was a formula that was put together. I don't know the formula, but they're all trying to make, each county's trying to make, come together and make a reasonable consensus on it, because it's based off of how many people the IDN actually serves. So a larger community would actually have to pay a bigger portion than we would have to pay. So I know that's the discussion that's been going on with the IDN.
Is that from the meeting in September? Because I remember in our last minutes it talked about we would get a report after that meeting in September.
They've met several times. I don't know from there, but I know they've met several times.
Okay.
I believe they actually came up with a per capita amount, and then whatever the agreement was fell apart. So they went back to work on it. Ed?
Thank you,
Yes,
Madam Chair.
Representative Comeau.
Thank you, Madam Commissioner. Did HHS give us any reports at all?
That seems to be kind of the problem. We would like to know, where they spent the money they got before and how it was spent. And some of the commissioners are very concerned that Carroll County money would be spent on people from Rockingham County, and to try to trace where it is actually being spent and to keep it so that it's being spent on Carroll County residents, even though they may have to go to a different county for their services. But the reporting and the record keeping doesn't seem to be giving the information that's necessary. I know that sounds vague, but they seem to have been working on it and trying to get these different entities to report. And it's certainly our representative, Ken, hasn't been pleased with the results.
Thank you. Yes, Jason?
I can say they have all the IDNs that did do reporting. They were all sent into that group that's meeting. And that group was deciding which report was the best, because some reports were weak, some reports were good, and they were trying to make one consistent report that all 10 counties could agree to of the information that they're looking for. I'm not sure where it stands in there, but I can tell you that they looked at all reports and there were several they liked and asked them to kind of put it together so that all the IDNs were doing the same thing, reporting wise.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, Representative
Madam Chair,
Comeau.
would it be appropriate for this delegation to send a letter to HHS saying that we need to understand how that reporting is being done? Because the reason why I voted against this IDN ProShare, the IDN system, is because of that loss of traceability, and that's exactly what we have. So perhaps they are working on a report, but we should be updated on where they're at in that situation, because now I'm not confident at all. Thank you.
I believe that, I do remember they said we were guaranteed to spend it here, but we have to see that. Yes, Representative Avaloni.
Madam Chair, I like Representative Comeau's request. However, I think we should invite the commissioner back to give us an explanation and update instead of a letter. And that was within the purview of the chair to do that.
Okay. I will invite him to our next meeting. Yes, Representative Cordelli.
Yeah, thank you. After one of our previous meetings, I did contact DHHS and they about the IDN and ProShare and so forth. And they said that they were basically leaving the formula to the counties and the IDNs who were working with the Association of Counties to come up with the formula, because all the counties were getting additional ProShare money well above what they had gotten in the past. And so it was the thought that that money should be used to fund the IDNs, but that the counties should come up with the formula themselves.
Not the individual counties, but the group,
Yes.
if I'm understanding you.
Right.
Thank you. Are there any other questions about the IDNs? Okay. Thank you. I guess that's, this, only other issue I had is the Siemens project. Do we know what's happening with the Siemens? At our last meeting, we're at 86%.
I do not know the percentage, but I do know that they're wrapping up. One of the last things they're working on is tweaking the heating and cooling system. So it's working better, but I believe all the everything major has been completed. Yeah, just the controls. is what they
Adaptive
have to work
controls
on.
and getting them working. Thank you very much. So I think, is there anything else to be brought up under other business? Representative Cordelli?
Thank you. I was just wondering if we could hear from the commissioners about the status with Avenue and what their plans are in that regard.
The status is basically what it was the day they were here. We have not done any further decision-making since that time. We had some new hires that are in the process of being trained, and we're also waiting. The contract has gone to our lawyer, and the lawyer had revised or suggested revisions in several areas, and that has been submitted to Avenue, and I do not believe we have gotten a response back.
Yes, Representative Cordelli?
Yes, thank you. I had submitted some comments regarding the contract. Do you know if those comments were also forwarded to the law department and to Avenue?
I do not know for sure, but I would expect they were.
Could we verify that?
I can.
I do know, Representative Kelly, that one of your concerns was a change in the contract. I'm not sure about some of the others, but I do know that one of them has been changed in the contract.
Yes. Representative Comeau?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Has Avenue begun to migrate the information over onto their servers, or has nothing happened? Like, where are they in the process of that transfer? I mean, do you have any idea?
It is my belief that that has started. But I'm not 100% sure. Kathy would be the person that would be able to give you the exact timeline.
Representative Cordelli?
I would have grave concerns if they started the migration process before there was a contract in place.
I think that's
I don't know if it has been. We haven't signed the contract,
No,
so.
there's no contract.
Yeah, I would think they wouldn't start that process until they had that in here.
I misunderstood possibly. I was thinking that, talking about the cloud and setup and getting everything ready to do the actual
Send out the info.
Yes, Representative Comeau?
Thank you, Madam Chair. The reason why it's just, there's no contract, but it's not like you're hiring somebody new. This is a company that's taken over a previous company. So I would think that the old contract is still in play. I don't think that's discontinued. So I think it's just a different, I don't know how this operates when you have an existing company that was bought and you're asking this new bought company to do something different with an existing contract. Do you understand what I mean? It doesn't work that way.
My recollection is that no one was sure before Avenue whether there was a contract or not.
Yes, Representative McCarthy?
The commissioners, we were told there was no contract.
Yes,
I
Mr.
was
Costello?
attended that meeting with Avenue, and I believe I asked the gentleman from Avenue about that contract, and he thought he had one. But that,
It hasn't been forthcoming.
yeah.
Representative
Yes,
Cordelli?
I believe that and a number of other things they said that they were going to send us. But I haven't seen anything. I don't know if anyone else has, but maybe the commissioners could, if we're gonna be moving forward and turning all of our information over to this company, they need to be a little bit responsive,
Yes, I agree. We do need a contract. The program, I would like to say, I also attended the demonstration. It looks really exciting for the capabilities and what it's going to allow the county to do, and hopefully help us to get more timely reports and more timely activities. It was pretty exciting how simple it was to put in one area, and how it went across the different modules to update as it went along, which is what we don't seem to have now. So, yes, Representative.
Just a question to the commission is there a reason we can't find out if we have a contract? I mean, someone should have a contract. There should be some regulatory piece on what we're doing. And I'm hearing, yes, we do, no, we don't.
Yeah, that
It
is.
sounds like the
Well,
budget
where it is
plan.
in the process. Yes,
If I may
Representative
speak
Costello.
to that issue, I believe the contract is, excuse me, that exists is from a number of years ago. And I didn't want to portray that we might not know where our copy of the contract was, which was why I asked him if he had a copy of the contract that we could look at. It's an old contract evidently, but
And it wasn't updated?
Just to follow up,
Representative Woodcock.
Did you happen to get a chance to see the copy of the contract? Did you follow up with you?
we're still awaiting that.
That's what we're waiting.
I don't know if it's come in or not, I haven't seen it.
Well, I think this is the responsibility of the commissioners, so hopefully we will get that sorted out.
That is why we have not signed the contract. We have questions, and as I said, we
And it's been to
submitted
the
it
lawyer.
to our lawyer.
Okay, thank you. Representative.
Thank you. Have we been making payments to this new company?
That's a question.
I'm sorry.
Go right ahead.
Yes.
We did send off a check, I think, either last week or week before, under our existing contract on the invoice that was due. In fact, it was past due. And so we did pay that, but the commissioners did authorize that payment. However, it was considerably less than what they are looking for going forward. So I'm not 100% convinced that for my money, that they're the people either.
Representative Comeau.
I'm not 100% convinced that this group that made the presentation is specifically the one that you want to use.
I have to follow up.
How about clarification?
Did I read it right? Do I need to clarify? Are you actually saying that you don't think that company is the company we should use, or?
Well, I don't know the answer to that yet. I need to do some more background work on my piece.
Okay, thank you. Thank you.
I don't want to cast aspersions on them either. I'm just saying that, like everything, I'd like to do the research too.
Okay. Are there any?
If I might,
Yes.
as you have seen in the past several years, there has been a lot of research, a lot of investigation before the commissioners have moved forward and made statements. At times it appears that we were indecisive, when in fact we were investigating and trying to decide what is the best route to take. Unfortunately, I learned when I came here that government moves somewhat slower than I might choose. So, but it's, being pedantic, it has its advantages. And so if we appear a little indecisive, that is why.
Okay. Any further comment, questions? Okay, thank you. We will move on. If there's nothing else to be brought before the group, other business, I will open it to public comment. If there is anyone in the public who would like to comment or ask questions. Seeing none, I will close public comment.
Lisa's got one.
Oh, I'm sorry. I didn't see you move. Okay.
I'll give you a brief update of
Okay.
the month and the year-to-date for the Registry of Deeds. Last month was the second month in a row that things have been booming at the registry. These are draft numbers, they're working on them as we speak for the month of October. But it looks like the county will have the highest amount of income this past month from last month. It was a real boom. For the year, the gross revenue to the county is up 9%. Let's see here. To the county, it's up 4%. The gross revenue is up 9%. So the state of New Hampshire is getting more than the county because of a lot of it being the transfer tax money, and we just get a fixed amount, 4% for that. But we're still up 4% for the year, so to date, for the first 10 months, it would be $804,624, more or less, the county's. The county has reaped $9.5 million taken in so far. So good news. We're going to make budget, I think.
Very good news. Thank you. Representative Cordelli.
Just following up on that indirectly, do we expect soon to have the third quarter numbers?
I would anticipate that we would. I kind of thought we might have them, but it does take at least a month to get them organized.
Okay.
Questions?
Guess we don't have them. Yes, Representative Burkhardt.
May I just ask a question of the registry deed?
Yes.
Mayor, so public and public comment. Can you give us just a really brief update on where we are on the restoration project?
We have restored 100 deed books this year. We have restored the 1892 Atlas, and we've spent everything except less than $1 in the budget.
Thank you.
They were delivered, the last of them were just delivered at the end of the summer.
Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
They're great, they're beautiful. Come down and take a look at them.
Thank you. Yes, Representative.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was surprised to hear your numbers, pleasantly surprised, because just this morning I was reading that in the state of New Hampshire, revenues from real estate were down $2 million less than a year ago. And the DRA noted that both the number of sales and value of properties were down over a year ago. But you're not seeing that in Carroll County at all?
Numbers are down.
Okay.
The volume of transactions is down. The value of the transactions is up.
Okay, so that is different from statewide. We're somehow better than average. Yeah.
Well, the docket count is down, meaning it's less transfers happening. There doesn't seem to be enough lower income housing available for sales. But the big price tag properties are selling.
Yes, Representative Avalon.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to the registrar.
Yes, thank you.
This year, a lot of towns went through a reevaluation. Have you seen that in the pricing?
I'm not sure that's showing yet. I think they're still going through it. I think that will come next year.
Yes, Representative Comeau.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, Registrar of Deeds, for attending this morning. The tax transfer fees, what percentage does the state actually take from that?
96%. We get 4%.
Just to follow up.
Sure.
So that's 4% you keep. You keep. And then we don't have enough money to restore our books, and then we have to take out a bond.
We haven't taken out a bond. We have chosen in the past to pay for it as we go.
98%?
96%.
Thank you.
I've also looked into whether, may I
Sure.
continue? Whether I could apply for LCHIP, Land and Community Heritage Program money to take care of the restoration. And it's ironic to me that the registry collects the money for the LCHIP for the state of New Hampshire cultural heritage, which cultural heritage funds for buildings, which we keep buildings and we keep the land records, but it won't fund for restoration of the land records, which this culture
Sad. Thank you. Are there any other questions or comments? Okay, the last item on the agenda is, is to go into a non-public session under New Hampshire RSA 91A32, with the delegation and the commissioners, and I know I need a motion for that. But before we do that, I would like to take a 5-minute break, because I think some people may need that. And so we can take 7 minutes and return here at noon. Does that make sense?
We'll make the motion after.
Yeah, we'll make the motion when we return and move into the session. Get back together.
Go ahead, that's fine.
Okay, and you are turned off?
No, we're not in non-public yet. We have
Okay, we get going.
Yeah, we have to go out.
Okay. And I have never done this before.
Are you inviting anyone into the non-public?
We're in public.
Well, Jason.
Oh, you're in public.
We are in public right
Okay.
now. Jason will be in for just a few minutes.
Okay.
And Mr. Costello is going to stay along with the commissioners to answer some of the questions on the financial issues. So, I think Representative Comeau?
Yes. Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm sorry. Thank you, Madam Chair. If we're ready to go into non-public, I'd like to move into 3 different sessions. The first session would be RSA 91A3 2A. That would be session 1. Session 2 would be RSA 91A3 2G. And also RSA 91A3 2E.
Okay, thank you.
We would need a
Is there-
second and a roll call.
I have a second, then we can have a question. The seconded by, I'm sorry, Representative Marsh. Okay.
So, just for clarification, Madam Chair, could you just, when you give the letter, could you just give like a, is it personnel, is it, which
First-
letters?
If I can, Madam Chair. Under A would be the dismissal, promotion, or compensation of any public employee, or the disciplining of such employee, or the investigation of any charge against him or her, unless the employee affected, 1, has a right to the public meeting, and 2, requests that the meeting be open, in which case the request can be granted. Letter G is consideration of security-related issues bearing on the immediate safety of security personnel or inmates at the county correctional facility by county correctional superintendent or their designees. And E is consideration or negotiation of pending claims or litigation which has been threatened in writing or filed against the public body or any subdivision thereof, or against any member thereof because of his or her membership therein, until the claim or litigation has been fully adjudicated or otherwise settled.
Thank you. There was no short word there.
Thank you. Yes?
Has to be a roll call. For discussion.
Yes.
We should move right into non-public.
Okay, I'll call for a roll call vote of the delegations.
Representative Ticehurst.
Yes?
Clerk will vote yes. Representative Bucco.
Yes.
Representative Cordelli.
Yes.
Representative Crawford.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Como.
Yes.
Representative Knark.
Yes.
Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative Burrows.
Yes.
Representative McDonald.
Yes.
Representative Woodcock.
Yes.
And Representative, and the Chair.
Yes,
Vote of 12-0, we are now in non-public.
thank you. Okay, I would entertain a motion.
So moved.
Okay, Representative Bucco moves to go in under 91A, is it 2A?
2C.
2C. I
RSA
don't have
91A.
3.
Colon 3.
Roman 2C.
Thank you.
C? Okay.
Excellent.
Started with being C.
So we have a Motion made, do we have a second?
Madam Chair,
Yes.
the originator of the motion needs to record what we are going into non-public for. It needs to make that motion.
It's an, it's an
RSA 91A:32C. I'm sorry.
Go ahead. I don't have it in front of me, so.
The originator of the motion needs to state why we're going into non-public.
Matters which if discussed would likely affect adversely the reputation of any
I need the
person.
91A number.
91A32C. You're saying it's C, right?
Yes.
Do we have a second?
Second.
I read this whole thing?
Please.
Matters which if discussed in public would likely affect adversely the reputation of any person other than a member of the public body, unless such person requests an open meeting. This exemption shall extend to include any application for assistance or tax abatement or waiver of a fee, fine, or other levy if based on inability to pay or poverty of the applicant.
Thank you. Okay, so we have the second, we done a roll call?
We will do a roll call. Any discussion?
Yeah. Is there any discussion? Hearing none, we'll do a roll call.
Representative Ticehurst.
Yes.
Clerk will vote yes. Representative Bucco.
Yes?
Representative Cordelli.
Yes.
Representative Crawford.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Comeau.
Yes.
Representative Knark.
Yes.
Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative Burrows.
Yes.
Representative McDonald.
Yes.
Representative Woodcock.
Yes.
And Representative Damaris.
Yes,
The chair, excuse me.
thank you. I'll receive a motion to seal the minutes. I had it on my notes too. I make a motion, have someone make a motion to seal the minutes.
So moved.
Representative Cordelli.
We should
And-
make sure we're sealing each session separately.
Right.
so
For
the
all
minutes-
sessions that were discussed in non-public.
That was my motion.
Thank you. We
Needs
have
to
a
be stated.
We just stated.
I would like to move that the delegation seals the minutes of non-public sessions 1, 2, and 3. 4, that's 4. And, yes, 4 sessions.
And, Madam Chair, if I might, I'm not, I'm a little bit versed in this, but I looked up Association of Counties checklist on this, and they recommend that the motion be to seal the minutes, and because it is determined that the divulgence of this information would, followed by.
I move to accept the amendment
Okay.
of my motion by Representative Ticehurst. No?
Needs to be in the original motion.
Okay.
No amendments to these.
Okay.
Okay.
I can't help.
And do we have a length of time on this as well?
Forever, isn't it?
Definitely.
You need to assign a date.
No, we don't.
You can, oh, you had something needs to say indefinitely.
Indefinitely. Okay, would you like to restate your motion? So that we have it all?
Just add indefinitely to what was said. I don't remember what was said at this point.
Move to seal the minutes of non-public, of our non-public sessions 1, 2, and 3
Definitely.
indefinitely.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second.
The motion's been seconded. Comeau. I think we should probably do a
Roll call.
roll call.
Representative Ticehurst.
Yes.
Clerk will vote yes. Representative Bucco.
Yes.
Representative Cordelli.
Yes.
Representative Crawford.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Comeau.
Yes.
Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative Burrows.
Yes.
Representative McDonald.
Yes.
Representative Woodcock.
Yes.
And the chair.
Yes. Okay, we are now out. And I would like to entertain a motion to seal the minutes.
You already did that.
Oh, that was what we just did?
Yeah.
Okay,
Madam Chair,
so, yes,
the time and mileage sheet was expected to be brought up during your meeting. So if the representatives could stop by the business office, I'm sure it's in there for their signature.
okay.
Or you can donate your time.
Or we can donate our time and mileage.
It's also-
apologize
It's
for
also
that.
attendance, right? So make sure that we're here.
I only have so much authority.
So, is there anything else to be brought before the committee? Yes, Representative Woodcock.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Based on the audit report that we heard today, would it be within our purview today to recommend or send a letter of recommendation or voice for the chair to the commissioners that they should authorize the hiring of a CPA and do other financial investigations and hiring as necessary, and that we would accept a transfer in future from this current budget?
What do people feel?
I think it's premature to do that at this
Premature to do
moment, in my
this.
opinion.
But I think that the commissioners certainly have heard from us our concerns in this matter. And I think it is understandable that we are going to support the efforts to deal with these issues. I don't know how much, we'll work that out, but I think there is
So
support.
there's no second, there's no discussion, right? Madam Chair?
Well, unless is there a second to the motion?
Apparently not.
I think we're all tired and punchy.
Yeah, people are clamoring for it half an hour
I
ago.
would make an alternative motion. My motion would be,
Excuse me, Madam Chair.
Okay,
I
yes.
think any referrals to a non-public would be not in order.
Okay. So Representative
I
Marsh.
I would
and,
make a motion that it is the sense of the delegation that the next budget reflect the need for adequate internal controls and adequate staffing in the finance office so that reports happen and the audit happens in a timely basis.
Is there a second to that motion?
I'll second that motion for discussion.
Thank you.
Next-
Yes,
Next
Representative
budget,
Wilson.
so you're willing to wait 6 weeks before?
More than that.
No, there is money in the budget now.
If the commissioners want to ask us for a transfer request for the time being, I'm certainly willing to do that, but I think that this gives them the knowledge that the delegation is going to have their backs as far as funding the position that they're talking about.
Follow-up?
Again, I would caution that we're not discussing positions.
Okay?
Okay.
That's well taken.
Representative Nelson.
CPA or equivalent? Or some other
That's
term
position.
to expand it because you've got
Positions,
some-
That's
positions,
positions.
Oh,
positions,
sorry.
please.
Solutions would be.
Solutions. Solutions to the issues. Thank you. Is there anything? Yes.
It's November 4th, and we all came here, we're gonna go run down the stamp to get paid. We haven't seen the 2018, I'm sorry, we haven't seen the 2018 fiscal figures.
For the, where we are in the third quarter? No, we have not.
The final.
Yes, Commissioner.
I just want you to all know that we're expecting those also today, and we're not provided for them. We were expecting them because they were on the agenda. They were not provided to us today.
Madam Chair, there's a motion on the floor.
Okay. There is a motion on the floor, was it seconded? Okay. The motion was made and seconded. Is there any further discussion? Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So, I will be corrected if this is not the appropriate time and place, but I have been concerned about in departments where a position is not filled and that money is used to either increase the salary of someone or possibly hire another person, and I don't want to condone that practice by doing what this motion suggests.
I don't think I suggested that in my motion. I didn't say anything about line item transfers in my motion.
Can we repeat the motion, because I
Can
think.
you
You
clarify?
didn't give a
Can you
specific.
tighten it a little bit?
Would you mind restating your motion?
All right, I'll see if I can remember what I said. We can
Thank
roll back
you.
the tape, that'd be better.
There were a lot of words.
It's late. I move that it's the sense of the delegation that money be budgeted in the upcoming budget to provide adequate internal controls and adequate staffing in the financial office such that we get our reports on a timely manner.
Perfect. Calvin?
Yeah, I think so.
Got it this time. And we had a second.
I think I said reports and audit.
Yes. Yes.
Roll
So-
call, Madam Chair.
Yes. We'll have a roll call vote.
Representative Ticehurst.
Yes.
Clerk will vote yes. Representative Bucco.
Yes.
Representative Cordelli.
Yes.
Representative Crawford.
Yes.
Representative Nelson.
Yes.
Representative Comeau.
Yes.
Representative Marsh.
Yes.
Representative Burrows.
Yes.
Representative McDonald.
Yes.
Representative Woodcock.
No.
And the chair.
Yes. Okay, so
Passes
the motion
11-1.
passes. Thank you. There's nothing else to come before the meeting. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
We're gonna go into convention?
No, we don't have.
We don't do that anymore.
We did the whole thing.
We don't do that anymore. Representative Cordelli.
Madam Chair, we will be recessing this meeting to go back into our executive committee meeting. That's right.
We're recessing this meeting to go back into.
No, we did recess
Well, that's
We
earlier.
did recess, that's right.
So we can end this meeting,
We can end this
That
meeting.
was the executive.
we can adjourn this meeting.
We can
and-
adjourn this meeting and then the
You're
exec, we
still
go
in
back
recess
into
from the
exec.
executive committee.
Right, right, so then we have to go back
Are
into.
you doing any more roll call
That's
stuff?
got it.
Oh, okay, so we
We'll
are
call
coming,
you when you get down the hall.
we are, okay, we are closing this, we're closing the recess.
We're closing the meeting of the county delegation.
Oh, good. So is that your motion to
That
close
is
the
my
meeting
motion.
of the delegation? Okay, is there a second?
Second.
Second from Representative Marsh. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All those opposed?
Opposed?
Okay, one opposed? Okay, thank you. So now we're in the executive? We're back in
You
the
would open, I believe you would reopen the meeting of the executive committee.
I don't know.
What time's your
Unless you want to.
Okay, okay,
Do
so
that.
the executive committee, then we just need, do we have anything else to do in the executive committee?
3 of them,
Yeah,
I believe, just line items.
Oh, I thought we finished.
We were on number 21.
Oh, we're on, that's right, now I remember.